Hi, it's Miss Melissa at the Oosterhout Free Library with the fourth part of Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary, published by Avon Books. Ramona and Howie have only been in kindergarten for 2 days, and this is their second big argument. They each want a piece of ribbon that they got from their teacher, Miss Binney. The mothers have sent them outside to play while the mothers make lunch. Sure, Ramona, said Howie, as the two mothers boosted Willa Jean's stroller up the steps, and he and Ramona were left together whether they wanted to be or not. Ramona sat down on the steps and tried to think of a name to call Howie. Pie Face wasn't bad enough. If she used some of the names she had heard big boys use at school, her mother would come out and scold her. Perhaps Little Booby Boy would do. Where's your trike? Asked Howie. It's in the garage, said Ramona. I don't ride it anymore now that I'm in kindergarten. How come? Said Howie. I'm too big, said Ramona. Everybody else in the block rides two-wheelers. Only babies ride tricycles. She made this remark because she knew Howie still rode his tricycle, and she was so angry about the ribbon she wanted to hurt his feelings. If Howie's feelings were hurt, he did not show it. He seemed to be considering Ramona's remarks in his usual deliberate way. I could take off one of the wheels if I had some pliers and a screwdriver, he said at last. Ramona was indignant. Wreck my tricycle? Howie just wanted to get her in trouble. It wouldn't wreck it, said Howie. I take the wheels off my tricycle all the time. You can ride on the front wheel and one back wheel. That way you'll have a two-wheeler. Ramona was not convinced. Come on, Ramona, coaxed Howie. I like to take wheels off tricycles. Ramona considered. If I let you take off a wheel, do I get to keep the ribbon? Well, I guess so, said Howie. After all, Howie was more interested in taking a tricycle apart than he was in playing with any ribbon. Ramona was doubtful about Howie's ability to turn her tricycle into a two-wheeler, but she was determined to have Miss Binney's red ribbon. She trundled her tricycle out of the garage. Then she found the pliers and a screwdriver and handed them to Howie, who went to work in a businesslike way. He used a screwdriver to pry off the hub. With the pliers, he straightened the cotter pin that held the wheel in place and removed it from the axle and pulled off the wheel. Next, he returned the cotter pin to its hole in the axle and bent the ends out once more so the axle would stay in place. There, he said with satisfaction. For once, he looked happy and sure of himself. You have to sort of lean to one side when you ride it. Ramona was so impressed by Howie's work that her anger began to drain away. Maybe Howie was right. She grasped her tricycle by the handlebars and mounted the seat. By leaning towards the side on which the wheel had been removed, she managed to balance herself and ride down the driveway in an uncertain and lopsided fashion. Hey, it worked, she called out when she reached the sidewalk. She circled and pedaled back towards Howie, who stood beaming at the success of his alteration. I told you it would work, he bragged. I didn't believe you at first, confessed Ramona, who would never again be seen riding a baby's three-wheeler. The back door opened and Mrs. Quimby called out, Come on, children, your tuna sandwiches are ready. See my two-wheeler, cried Ramona, pedaling in a lopsided circle. Well, aren't you a big girl, exclaimed her mother. How did you ever manage to do that? Ramona came to a halt. Howie fixed my trike for me and told me how to ride it. What a clever boy, said Mrs. Quimby. You must be very good with tools. Howie beamed with pleasure at this compliment. And Mama, said Ramona, Howie said I can have Miss Binney's ribbon. Sure, agreed Howie. What do I want with an old ribbon? I'm going to weave it in and out of the front spokes of my two-wheeler and ride so fast it'll make a blur, said Ramona. Come on, Howie, let's go eat our tuna fish sandwiches. Chapter 3 is called Seat Work. There were two kinds of children who went to kindergarten. Those who lined up beside the door before school, as they were supposed to, and those who ran around the playground and scrambled to get in line when they saw Miss Binney approaching. Do you want to guess? Ramona ran around the playground. One morning, as Ramona was running around the playground, she noticed Davy waiting for Henry Huggins to lead him across the intersection. She was interested to see that Davy was wearing a black cape pinned to his shoulders with two big safety pins. While Henry held up two cars and a cement truck, Ramona watched Davy crossing the street. The more Ramona saw of Davy, the better she liked him. He was such a nice, shy boy with blue eyes and soft brown hair. Ramona always tried to choose Davy for a partner in folk dancing, and when the class played Grey Duck, Ramona always tagged Davy unless he was already in the mush pot. When Davy arrived, Ramona marched up to him and asked, "Are you Batman?" "No," said Davy. "Are you Superman?" asked Ramona. "No," said Davy. Who else could Davy be in a black cape? Ramona stopped and thought, but was unable to think of anyone else who wore a black cape. "Well, who are you?" she asked at last. "Mighty Mouse!" crowed Davy, delighted that he had baffled Ramona. "I'm gonna kiss you, Mighty Mouse!" shrieked Ramona.
Here I come to save the day. That means that Mighty Mouse is on the way.
"I'm going to kiss you, Mighty Mouse!" shrieked Ramona. Davy began to run, and Ramona ran after him. Around and around the playground they ran, with Davy's cape flying out behind him. Under the monkey bars and around the jungle gym she chased him. "Run, Davy, run!" screamed the rest of the class, jumping up and down until Miss Binny was seen approaching and everyone scrambled to get in line. Every morning afterward, when Ramona reached the playground, she tried to catch Davy so she could kiss him. "Here comes Ramona!" the other boys and girls shouted when they saw Ramona walking down the street. "Run, Davy, run!" And Davy ran with Ramona after him. Round and round the playground they ran while the class cheered Davy on. "That kid ought to be in track when he gets a little older," Ramona heard one of the workers across the street say one day. Once Ramona came near enough to grab Davy's clothes, but he jerked away, popping the buttons off his shirt. For once, Davy stopped running. "Now see what you did," he accused. "My mother's going to be mad at me." Ramona stopped in her tracks. "I didn't do anything," she said indignantly. "I just hung on. You did the pulling." "Here comes Miss Binny," someone called out, and Ramona and Davy scurried to get in line by the door. After that, Davy stayed farther away from Ramona than ever, which made Ramona sad because Davy was such a nice boy and she did so long to kiss him. However, Ramona was not so sad that she stopped chasing Davy. Round and round they went every morning until Miss Binny arrived. Miss Binny, by this time, had begun to teach her class something more than games, the rules of kindergarten and the mysterious Donzer song. Ramona thought of kindergarten as being divided into two parts. The first part was the running part, which included games, dancing, finger painting, and playing. The second part was called seat work. Seat work was serious. Everyone was expected to work quietly in their own seat without disturbing anyone else. Ramona found it difficult to sit still because she was always interested in what everyone else was doing. "Ramona, keep your eyes on your own work," Miss Binny said, and sometimes Ramona remembered. For the first seat work assignment, each member of the class was told to draw a picture of their own house. Ramona, who had expected to learn to read and write in school like her sister Beatrice, used her new crayons to quickly draw her house: 2 windows, a door, and a red chimney. With her green crayon, she scribbled in some shrubbery. Anyone familiar with her neighborhood could tell the picture was of her house, but somehow Ramona was not satisfied. She looked around to see what others were doing. Susan, with the beautiful curls, had drawn a picture of her house and was adding a girl with the boing-boing curls looking out the window. Howie, who had drawn his house with the garage door open and a car inside, was adding a motorcycle parked at the curb. Davy's house looked like a clubhouse built by some boys who had a few old boards and not enough nails. It leaned to one side in a tired sort of way. Ramona studied her own drawing and decided she would have to do something to make it more interesting. After considering various colors of crayon, she selected the black and drew big black swirls coming from the windows. "You aren't supposed to scribble on your picture," said Howie, who was also inclined to pay attention to other people's work. Ramona was indignant. "I didn't scribble. The black is part of my picture." When Miss Binney asked the class to set their pictures on the chalk rail so everyone might see them, the class noticed Ramona's picture at once because it was drawn with bold, heavy strokes and because of the black swirls. "Miss Binney, Ramona scribbled all over her house," said Susan, who by now had revealed herself as the kind of girl who always wanted to play house so she could be the mother and boss everyone. "I did not," protested Ramona, beginning to see that her picture was going to be misunderstood by everyone. Maybe she had been wrong to try to make it interesting. Maybe Miss Binney did not want interesting pictures. "You did too." Joey ran up to the chalk rail and pointed at Ramona's black swirls. "See?" The class, including Ramona, waited for Miss Binney to say Ramona should not scribble on her picture. But Miss Binney merely smiled and said, "Remember your seat, Joey. Ramona, why don't you tell us about your picture?" "I didn't scribble on it," said Ramona. "Of course you didn't," said Miss Binney. Ramona loved her teacher even more. "Well," she began, "that black isn't scribbling, it's smoke coming out of the windows." "And why is smoke coming out of the windows?" gently pressed Miss Binney. "Because there's a fire in the fireplace and the chimney is stopped up," explained Ramona. "It's stopped up with Santa Claus, but he doesn't show in the picture." Ramona smiled shyly at her teacher. "I wanted to make my picture interesting." Miss Binney returned her smile. "And you did make it interesting." Davy looked worried. "How does Santa Claus get out?" he asked. "He doesn't stay in there, does he?" "Of course he gets out," said Ramona. "I just didn't show that part." The next day, seat work got harder. Miss Binney said everyone had to learn to print their name. Ramona saw right away that this business of names was not fair. When Miss Binney handed each member of the class a strip of cardboard with their name printed on it, anyone could see that a girl named Ramona was going to have to work harder than a girl named Anne or a boy named Joe. Not that Ramona minded having to work harder. She was eager to learn to read and write. But having been the youngest member of her family and of the neighborhood, however, she had learned to watch for unfair situations. Carefully, Ramona printed R, the way Miss Binney had printed it. A was easy. Even a baby could print A. Miss Binney said A was pointed like a witch's hat, and Ramona was planning to be a witch for the Halloween parade. O was also easy. It was a round balloon. Some people's O's looked like leaky balloons, but Ramona's O's were balloons full of air. "I like the way Ramona's O's are fat balloons full of air," Miss Binney said to the class, and Ramona's heart filled with joy. Miss Binney liked her O's best. Miss Binney walked around the classroom looking over shoulders. "That's right, class. Nice pointed A's," she said. "A's with nice sharp peaks. No, Davy, D faces the other way." "Splendid, Karen. I like the way Karen's K has a nice straight back." Ramona wished she had a K in her name so she could give it a nice straight back. Ramona enjoyed Miss Binney's descriptions of the letters of the alphabet and listened to them as she worked. In front of her, Susan played with a curl while she worked. She twisted it around her finger, stretched it out, and let it go. Boing, 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 Ramona thought automatically. "Ramona, let's keep our eyes on our work," said Miss Binney. "No, Davy. D faces the other way." Once more, Ramona bent over her paper. The hardest part of her name, she soon discovered, was getting the right number of points on the M and the N. Sometimes her name came out as Ranoma, but before long she remembered the 2 points came first. "Good work, Ramona," said Miss Binney the first time Ramona printed her name correctly. Ramona hugged herself with happiness and love for Miss Binney. Soon she was sure she'd be able to join her letters together and write her name in the same rumply grown-up way that Beezus wrote her name. Then Ramona discovered that some kids had an extra letter followed by a dot. "Miss Binny, why don't I have a letter with a dot after it?" she asked. "Because we have only one Ramona," said Miss Binny. "We have two Erics, Eric Jones and Eric Ryan. So we call them Eric J and Eric R because we don't want to get our Erics mixed up." Ramona did not like to miss anything. "Could I have another letter with a little dot?" she asked, knowing that Miss Binny would not think she was pestering. Miss Binny smiled and leaned over Ramona's table. "Of course you may. This is the way to make a letter Q. A nice round O with a little tail, like a cat. And there was your little dot, which is called a period." Then Miss Binny walked on, supervising seat work. Ramona was charmed with her last initial. She drew a nice round O beside the one Miss Binny had drawn, and then she added a tail before she leaned back to admire her work. She had one balloon and two Halloween hats in her first name and a cat in her last name. She doubted if anyone else in the morning kindergarten had such an interesting name. The next day at seat work time, Ramona practiced her Q while Miss Binny walked around helping those with S in their names. All the S's were having trouble. "No, Susan," said Miss Binny. "S stands up straight. It does not lie down as if it were a little worm crawling on the ground." Susan pulled out a coin and let it spring back. "Boing, boing, boing," thought Ramona. "My, how many S's we have that are crawling along like little worms," remarked Miss Binny. Ramona was pleased that she had escaped S. She drew another Q and admired it for a moment, before she added two little pointed ears, and then she added two whiskers on each side so that her Q looked the way a cat looked when it crouched on a rug in front of the fireplace. How pleased Miss Binny would be! Miss Binny would say to the kindergarten, "What a splendid Q Ramona has made! It looks exactly like a little cat." "No, Davy," Miss Binny was saying, "a D does not have four corners. It has two corners. Then one side is curved like a robin redbreast." This conversation was so interesting that Ramona was curious to see Davy's D for herself. She waited until Miss Binny had moved away, then she slipped out of her seat and over to the next table to look at Davy's D. It was a great disappointment. "That D doesn't look like a robin," she whispered. "It doesn't have any feathers. A robin has to have feathers." She had watched robins pulling worms out of her front lawn many times. They all had feathers on their front, little soft feathers mussed by the wind. Davy studied his work. Then he scrubbed out half of his D with his eraser and drew in a series of little jags. It did not look like Miss Binny's D, but it did look, in Ramona's opinion, more like the front of a robin with feathers mussed by the wind, which is what Miss Binny wanted, right? A D like a robin redbreast. "Good work, Davy," said Ramona, trying to sound like her teacher. "Good work, Davy." Now maybe Davy would let her kiss him. "Ramona," said Miss Binny, "in your seat, please." She walked back to look at Davy's seat work. "No, Davy. Didn't I tell you the curve of a D is as smooth as a robin redbreast? Yours is all jagged." Davy looked bewildered. "Those are feathers," he said. "Feathers, like a robin?" "Oh, I'm sorry, Davy. I didn't mean—" Miss Binny behaved as if she didn't know quite what to say. "I didn't mean you to show each feather. I meant you to make it smooth and rounded." "Ramona told me to do it this way," said Davy. "Ramona said a robin has feathers." "Ramona is not the kindergarten teacher." Miss Binny's voice, although not exactly cross, was not her usual gentle voice. "You make your D the way I showed you and never mind what Ramona says." Ramona felt confused. Things had such an unexpected way of turning out all wrong. Miss Benny had said a D should look like a robin redbreast, didn't she? And robins had feathers, didn't they? So why wasn't putting feathers on a D all right? Davy glared at Ramona as he took out his eraser and scrubbed out half his D a second time. He scrubbed it so hard he rumpled his paper. "Now see what you did," he said. Ramona felt terrible. Dear little Davy, whom she loved so much, was angry with her, and now he would run faster than ever. She would never get to kiss him. Worse, Miss Benny did not like D's with feathers, so she probably wouldn't like Q's with ears and whiskers either. Hoping her teacher would not see what she was doing, Ramona quickly and regretfully erased the ears and whiskers from her Q. How plain and bare it looked with only its tail left to keep it from being an O. Miss Benny, who could understand that Santa Claus in the chimney would make a fireplace smoke, might be disappointed if she knew Ramona had given her Q ears and whiskers, because lettering was different from drawing pictures. Ramona loved Miss Benny so much she did not want to disappoint her. Not ever. Miss Benny was the nicest teacher in the whole world. Next time on Part 5, we'll find out how Ramona's love for Miss Benny might get taken a bit too far. So, I will see you next time from the Oosterhout Free Library.